Okay, hello, welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're going to be speaking about stem cell therapy with Christian Drapeau, who's the founder and chief science officer of STEM-Regen. I am Maria Rickard-Hong. I'm the education and media director for Documenting Hope and your host. If you have any questions, just type it into the chat box. We are going to be taking questions at the end. Make sure you type it into the chat box if you could, please. It makes it easier for me to manage. And just to let you know about us, Documenting Hope is a 501c3 nonprofit. We provide root cause healing solutions for children's chronic health and developmental conditions. We provide resources and support for parents and practitioners who are ready to move beyond the conventional symptom-suppressive approach to disease management and to instead use a root cause approach. And one of our resources is Healing Together. It's our online membership community for parents who are ready to help their child heal. The healing journey is not an easy one, but Healing Together offers a step-by-step healing framework along with expert guidance and community support to help your child. And today, April 30th, 2025, is the final day to use code Autism25 for 25% off annual memberships. If it sounds like a good fit, we'd love to see you inside. I'll post the link into the chat, but just know that it is healing.documentinghope /register, and you can find out more about that. And just a quick disclaimer about our webinar. This webinar is not a substitute for medical advice, treatment, diagnosis, or consultation with a medical professional. It is intended for general informational purposes only and should not be relied upon to make determinations related to treatment of a medical condition. Documenting Hope has not verified and does not guarantee the accuracy of the information provided in this webinar. And today my guest is Christian Drapeau, the founder and chief science officer of STEM-Regen, which uses powerful ingredients found in nature to create scientifically advanced stem cell solutions for optimal health and longevity. So hello, Christian, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, I always like to say or ask my guests, tell us about yourself and how you got into doing what you're doing, because I always find it such an interesting backstory.
Okay, well, my background is in neurophysiology. So I was studying, I was at the Montreal Neurological Institute. This is many years ago, essentially doing research on epilepsy and memory. I was always interested in plants, and I had an opportunity at some point to be hired by a company that was selling a blue-green algae, which you may have heard of, blue-green algae from Klamath Lake. So this was 1995, and I was hired to study how this plant was working in the body to support any of the marketing claims that were being made. And it's the research with that plant that led me, one thing leading to another, to discover that it was working in the body as a stem cell mobilizer, triggering the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. From that day on to that discovery was January 2001. And from that day, then I've been involved in stem cell research ever since.
Okay. For those of us who don't know, tell us what stem cells are and why they're so powerful and what they can do for us.
I mean, stem cells, let me put a little bit this in context because for now, I think when we talk about stem cells, for most people, it's a treatment. It's a novel thing that has just been discovered a few years ago, and it's great for regeneration and repair. And really the backstory is that we've known now for decades that the bone marrow has stem cells, I would say since the 1960s, that the bone marrow has stem cells, and they are precursors to blood cells. They were believed until fairly recently, I mean, until year 2000, that they were limited in their ability to become other types of tissues, so they can simply make blood cells. So really the big discovery in the early 2000s is that these stem cells in the bone marrow that have been used, that have been known for a long time to be precursors to blood cells, we discovered that they can in fact become basically everything in the body. So they're like a blank cell, and they are released with the intent of going to another tissue and repair. They are the body's repair system. So they're much, much more than just a treatment. You're born with these stem cells, and during our entire life, they are the repair system. I find it fascinating that this is like one of those phenomenon hidden in plain sight. Every human being on the planet has experienced that the body heals, the body repairs. We've all had a broken bone, a cut, something, and we see that the body repairs. And in science, they would say it's your immune system. But then I would say, tell me what cell of the immune system is in charge of repair.
Mhm.
And there's none. So we discovered that it is this very, very small population of white blood cells, lymphocytes in the blood, called stem cells, that are the repair system. So their release is triggered from the bone marrow. They go to the area where there's a problem and they repair. So that's what stem cells are. They are the repair system of the body.
Interesting. Okay. And then I think I mean, you talked about it a little bit in your book, which I read. I think it's your fifth book, Cracking the Stem Cell Code. I read this one and I wrote about it. But you did talk about the controversy in there, and maybe you could just speak about that, about the embryonic stem cells versus adult stem cells, just so people are more comfortable with the issue.
So again, if I go back some decades ago, we knew through the science of embryology that there is such a thing as the first cell, which is, when you couple the egg with the sperm and you get that first cell that will develop into a full organism. So this idea of a stem cell that can do everything has been in our minds, and then from there, scientists were able to separate cells from the early embryo, so 8 to 10 days old embryo, and clone different, like it's been done in mice, rats, dogs, monkeys, everybody, not everybody, but I'm sure some people remember the sheep dolly.
Yes.
So the science of being able to extract these cells from the embryo and then develop them into other organism has been known for quite some time, with the dream that if we could do this in humans, we could probably be able to regrow, let's say, another heart for you, another liver. So the idea of organ regeneration was there for a long time, but nobody has ever been able to grow and expand in the lab human embryonic stem cells until 1998, which was really the explosion of what we know today as stem cell research. So these stem cells, because they're extracted from an embryo, it's important to understand no babies have been used to do this.
Yeah.
It's the result of in vitro fertilization. When couples go to create these small embryos, they're preserved, they're frozen, and after, when the family, the parents have all the children that they want, then leftovers embryos are either discarded into the sink, just thrown in the trash, or used for research. So that's where they were coming from. And the development of that science, nevertheless, brought some ethical concern that you are actually working with potential human beings. And the real controversy really come, and it's buried into religion. The controversy is, when is life beginning? When is ensoulment beginning? When is the soul getting into this embryo? Catholics, Christian believe that it's on the day of conception.
Mhm.
Buddhist, Hindus, Muslim, pretty much everybody else believe that it's after the third month. So for Christian, you kill a human being if you play with an embryo. So, and that's really where the conflict comes. So many group in the world, a lot in the United States, took the opinion, and I have no side in this issue,
Right.
took the opinion that embryonic stem cell research was akin to killing human beings. They were killed anyway. They're thrown in the trash or used for research. And that created a lot of ethical issues. And it's this pressure that has led scientists to look at another type of stem cells believed to be limited. But when we started to really study them, we realized that adult stem cells, in some ways, when used properly, effectively, are pretty much as powerful, if not better for treatment than embryonic stem cells. And that's why they're used today pretty much everywhere. So we're talking about adult stem cells, which includes umbilical cord stem cells. So
Mhm.
everything after birth is considered adult stem cells.
Right. And then another not exactly ethical problem with embryonic stem cells is that they could become cancer tetramas.
That's
Is that right?
that that's actually the big medical, put the ethical issues aside, the
Yeah.
big medical scientific blockage in using embryonic stem cells is that they are made to become a full organism. So
Mhm.
when you want to limit them to become, let's say, a new heart, well, they become a new heart blended with bones and tissues and hair and all kinds of other things, which is called a teratoma. It's tumor. So the risk of tumor formation is huge when we use embryonic stem cells, and it is still to this day the reason why they are still not used in treatment.
Okay, interesting. All right. And so then the typical, I guess, stem cell therapy is where you would take stem cells either from your own self, which would be autologous. How do you say that?
Autologous. That's right.
Autologous?
Autologous.
Okay. Or from somebody else,
Correct.
perhaps, and then inject it into you. And that's what
Correct.
the research had been starting from, I guess, 98 till whenever. And then you, well, not maybe not you, but you and others discovered that there was something else that could be done. Maybe you could
Correct.
explain that.
Correct. So again, so I'm glad we started a little bit with historical context because your questions are sort of leading back. And I love this because to me, if we don't give the historical context, I think we lose sight of the real meaning of what we're talking about.
Mhm.
So the scientific community wanted to really develop these embryonic stem cells. We see the ethical issues, but also the scientific issue of tumor formation. So now we're looking for other type of stem cells, thinking that bone marrow stem cells are really not that effective. They can only become blood cells. So we're looking at other options. So the other options are umbilical cord stem cells. So the work with umbilical cord stem cells started. There are some issues with umbilical cord stem cells. They work, so there's no problem. They do work, but there are some risks of contamination, probably disease transfer, but also they're coming from somebody else, some risk of rejection, very small to none. But nonetheless, this is all part of the discussions. So in that development, people started to go back and see, well, are these stem cells from the bone marrow really not good stem cells? And we discover actually they're just as good in terms of stem cells. And then along the way, we discover that fat tissues contain also stem cells. We can extract them from fat tissue. And along the way, we discover, well, guess what? They are pretty much everywhere in the body. Now, the
Mhm.
question is, which is the place that is the easiest and most effective to go and get them? And the blood and the fat tissues are
Mhm.
probably the place that are easiest to get them. But along all of this, as I was studying this blue-green algae in 1995 and not understanding why people consuming this blue-green algae were getting a broad variety of health benefits. Like people had significant benefits on cardiac function, pancreatic function, liver, the lung, the brain, joints, so many aspects of human health that the question was really to me, what is this one thing that this plant is doing, this blue-green algae is doing to bring benefits to so many different aspects of human health? And one thing leading to another, I discovered that this plant was working as a stem cell mobilizer. Within
Mhm.
an hour or two of consuming this plant, we can count more stem cells in circulation into the bloodstream. So now there's another approach to tapping into the regenerative potential of stem cells, which is simply triggering the release of your own from your bone marrow, therefore increasing the number of stem cells in circulation. So instead of increasing the number of stem cells in circulation through an injection, we
Right.
do this by triggering the release of our own stem cells.
Right. And there was a Japanese study, I forget who the author was, but I think they didn't do any kind of injection or anything like that, but they just separated people by who had the most amount of stem cells
Mhm.
and who didn't. And they found that the people who had the most naturally occurring amount of stem cells did better. Maybe
Correct.
talk about that a little bit.
Correct. Yeah, if we look at all the science of stem cells as the repair system, meaning when
Mhm.
there's an injury, the affected area, so that study specifically was with stroke, but the same phenomenon has been studied with heart attack, bone fracture, burn to the skin, like any kind of injury will trigger the release of specific compounds that go to the bone marrow that will trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So within 3 to 5 days, the number of stem cells will increase up to tenfold. Now, these stem cells don't know where to go. They don't know where the injury is. So they circulate everywhere in the body. But when they circulate in the area where we have this injury, locally, the injury is releasing another compound called SDF1. And when SDF1 is released, there's a receptor at the surface of stem cells. These two will connect. And when this connection takes place, the stem cell express adhesion molecule will cling to the capillary wall and then will migrate through the capillary wall in the tissue. And in the tissue will actually coordinate the repair of the tissue. So it's the repair system. In this whole process, the one parameter that has the greatest significance in one's ability to repair is how many stem cells do you have in your bloodstream available to participate in this process of tissue repair. So the study that you're talking about is people showing up at the hospital after a stroke. And actually, there's two of them. I believe that I mentioned. One is stroke. One was heart attack. Same outcome in both studies. So on the day of the stroke or the heart attack, where the doctors quantify the number of stem cells in circulation because the number will increase over a number of days. So on that day, it's basically giving you the baseline of how many stem cells do they naturally have in their bloodstream. And then a number of weeks later, they separated all these individuals into two groups: the people who recovered well, were returned home to have a normal life, and the people who did not recover well and needed to go for medical treatment or rehab. And the difference between the two is that people with more stem cells, people who were returned home had about twice the number of stem cells than those who went to rehab. Or
Okay.
conversely, people who had lingering problems after the heart attack or the stroke had about half the number of stem cells in circulation. And we see this across many, many studies. If you compare, generally speaking, statistically, people who repair better versus people who don't repair well, and you get about half the number of stem cells in circulation.
Interesting. And then there was something you read about diabetes, which I
Mhm.
thought was really, really interesting, is that I can't remember if it was your thought or somebody's study that said that people with diabetes probably just don't have enough circulating stem cells to be able to repair the pancreas. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, Chris. So this was a
Yeah.
study. So the first thing to understand with diabetes is that studies have shown very clearly that stem cells can leave the bone marrow, go to the pancreas naturally without any stimulation of any kind,
Mhm.
and become insulin producing cells of the pancreas. Not only it is a natural phenomenon, but if it did not happen, we would not survive because the pancreas has a turnover rate that is such that by age 40, you would have completely lost your pancreas long time ago.
Hmm.
So this process of stem cells going to the pancreas and producing insulin producing cells is happening every day. It's a totally natural process. So the next thing to demonstrate is that if this process is natural and we stimulate the release of stem cells from the bone marrow, can we transform, can we change the course of the development of diabetes or even reverse or improve a condition of diabetes? And the studies are clear. Yes, by putting more stem cells in circulation, you can actually impact the outcome of diabetes. And when the number of stem cells in circulation was quantified in people at various stages in the development of diabetes, then we see a straight line, meaning as you go from normal glucose tolerance to the first sign of diabetes, which is impaired fasting glucose, or you start to have elevated A1C, HbA1c, then right there you can see that these people have fewer stem cells in circulation. When you have impaired glucose tolerance, fewer stem cells in circulation. When you get diagnosed with insulin-dependent diabetes, you're about at half the number of stem cells that you find in healthy people. And with diabetes, there's something that is sort of the vicious cycle here, is that the fact that you have higher glycemia and glycation, that also affects stem cell mobilization. So now you release fewer stem cells, and the fact that you have fewer stem cells, you can't repair the pancreas. So there's sort of this loop here with diabetes, but definitely there's a link here between the development of diabetes and many other problems, but also having a lower number of stem cells in circulation.
Yeah, interesting. So that's uh, a I don't know, just a profound thought for me and for a lot of people that I know that have diabetes or some other kind of chronic health condition, to be aware of that because I don't think it's in the mainstream. And
Oh no.
you even wrote about that at the beginning of your book. There's like 25,000 research articles every year about stem cell therapy, but
Mhm.
this much makes it into the mainstream media. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's very interesting, and it's not a criticism at all. It's just an observation of a fact of scientific development. But being so much in it right now, I'm amazed to see how slow the research part crosses to academia and then crosses to practice, because normally that's what it is. It's research to academia to practice. And
Right.
right now it has bypassed academia. You can find a lot of places using stem cells, but
Mhm.
if you go back to what people take as the reference for scientific knowledge, which is academia, and you ask, is it real, all this science about stem cells? And it's not rare to get people answering, no, this is not true, this is a scam, it's not real, it's not really demonstrated. And it's amazing because there is so much data about stem cells. It's to me, it's an anomaly. But yeah, there's tons of studies.